Good morning, everyone. My name is Prasad from AICB, and welcome to this joint webcast between AICB and PwC Malaysia on accelerating digital workforce transformation in financial services. As some of you are aware, this is the final part of a 5-part digital banking series under AICB's Empowering Bankers webinar conversations. Thank you to those of you who have been following the series, and welcome to those who are joining us for the first time today. We do hope that you will continue to join us in many more of our upcoming webinars as we bring you greater online sharing of key developments during these times. A few housekeeping details before we start. The microphones of all the participants are automatically muted to minimize disruption during the session. This webinar is also an interactive session, so if you have any questions, please submit your questions online by clicking the Q&A tab rather than the chat tab. Please do introduce yourself by stating your name and the organization that you represent. We will do our best to try and answer as many questions as we can. You may also use the chat function to provide comments and feedback during the session. Kindly note that this session is recorded. The speaker's presentations will be emailed to you, and the recording will be available on the AICB member portal. If you have to leave the webinar session, please select Leave Meeting on the bottom right of your screen to do so. You can still rejoin the webinar session if it's still in progress. Now, to set the context, following on from our previous session on digital banking technology, where the discussion centered on the various digital technologies and practices available in the digital banking environment, as well as the different approaches banks are taking to enable digital transformation, today we focus on a very fundamental part of the entire digital transformation, which is around people and the talent needed to build and strengthen a digital workforce. Our panel of speakers for today will share insights on the concept and significance of digital upskilling and reskilling, what is needed to build the entire ecosystem to support this workforce transformation, and also to touch on the approaches organizations are taking in this area. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our speakers for today, Lim Kwan-Sek, Director, People and Organization, PwC Malaysia; Jasmin Peters, Director, Experience Consulting Lead, PwC Malaysia; and last but not least, Datuk Nora Manaf, CB Group Chief Human Capital Officer, Maybank Group, all of whom are highly valued experts in digital workforce transformation. We are indeed extremely happy to have you as part of these discussions today. May I please invite Lim Kwan-Sek to begin the session with his remarks and presentation. Take it away, Kwan-Sek.
Thanks, Prasad. And morning, everyone. I'm really excited to be able to share my views and some of my insights and lessons learned with everybody today. Can I have the next slide, please? I think just to set the context for today, I think Bill Gates' quote is like really relevant for these trying times, right? And what does it really all say? It just means that we all have to be more agile in how we do things. We need to be adaptable. And I think last but not least, I think we got to continue to keep changing the way we work and the way we do things and keep reinventing ourselves. I think really in such times, us being tested now with COVID-19, this statement really just resonates with me, and I hope it does with everybody as well. Can I have slide 7, please? Now, not to give away my age, but all the 6 icons on the left makes a lot of sense to me. I recognize them, and I hope some of you do as well. However, I think we all need to have a mindset change, right? At least I started in a very different world back then, and a large percentage of your workforce today only recognizes the 6 icons on the right. I'm sure after this session, if you give them a test, it'd be interesting to know how many recognize any of the symbols on the left. If I move to slide 8, please. So we recently asked about 1,000 Malaysians if they're ready for the new world. And here's some good news, right? I think there's a lot of general agreement that technology will be changing the way they work, at least in the next few years and in the foreseeable future. More than 3/4 were excited and optimistic that the role of technology and how they can play in their roles and in the organization they work in. What's really nice for me to see is that they have this desire to be digitally savvy. Right? Almost all of them would accept that opportunity to better understand or use technology. And 85% actually said they would learn new skills now or even completely retrain themselves. And that's really great to hear. But the unfortunate part is that a lot more effort is needed. Right? Less than 40% say they are given opportunities by their current employer to improve their digital skills. In fact, very recently, PwC, we completed our global annual CEO survey. And for financial services CEOs, they actually are less likely than their peers in the other industries to say that they have made significant progress in their upskilling efforts. Which only, I guess, if to see positively, there's still a lot more to be done, and that's just great news. Slide 9, please. So today, new world and new skills is really more relevant than ever. A lot of businesses, organizations, and you may recognize this in your own organization, they're experiencing a lot of focus in these 4 areas. I think productivity has always been at the top of our mind, but enhanced productivity is something every business leader is always asking for. Fortunately or unfortunately, COVID-19 has added that much more pressure to the ask of productivity. The second area of focus is on digital acceleration. So glad to know a lot of organizations and everyone here on board today means this is something that's on top of your mind. There's a need for digital transformation. The third one, our folks, as I said earlier, the workforce just needs to be more adaptable, ready for change. There's a lot of disruption in the business, and hence the people just need to be more resilient, right, and more agile. And lastly, I think employers who then support and upskill their people, I mean, that obviously will just build more trust, right, and just gain that much brownie points for your future. As you can see, websites, newspaper, everywhere, it's just plastered all over that organizations globally are facing all sorts of challenges. Right? Hence, it's really important to survive and strive. We need to reskill and upskill our workforce. Now, I'm making the point here because a lot of people talk about upskilling. Upskilling really is just about expanding your current knowledge and capabilities to perform new roles. But what's really more important, and right now, and I hope all of you have started this initiative in your organization, is to reskill your workforce. And that's really building new knowledge and capabilities and adopt new technologies to perform on your current roles as well as augmented roles. Can I have slide 10, please? So what skills are needed to be adaptable and remain relevant? So business leaders have been started to ask for a lot of these capabilities. And in fact, you probably recognize that some of them have been implemented in your own organizations. There's been a lot of ask for people solutions, right? And I think that just got pushed to the forefront, especially in Malaysia, since the MCO started. Organizations and businesses are looking to digitize as well as digitalize their processes and their ways of working. The second one on connectivity platforms, and that's something, well, I'm staring at it today, right? I'm sure everybody had to very quickly learn how to use Zoom or Microsoft Teams and various other technology solutions to connect and work. And there are also some platforms out there where teams can come together on a daily basis and track their daily progress and get together. So that's obviously very important as you're all working from home. Data analytics and how we visualize those data, I mean, that's something that's been looked at by banks for many years now. But obviously with new tools, technology, the workforce have to learn and really upskill themselves in using this. And I'm sure you probably already see a lot of it commonplace in your reports today. Process automation, that's another big one. An example of that would be, say, RPA, right? Robotic process automation. That's something that's really widely used in banks and insurance in this region. Another example would be different ways of getting your e-signature on your documents, right? These are all just different methods and tools to automate your processes. And of course, some of the more upcoming ones that I'm sure everyone's familiar with will be how do we use blockchain, AI, augmented reality or virtual reality. But at the end of the day, what is it that we all really want in our organizations? It's really to future-proof your workforce, right? Increase value to your customers and reduce costs. Right? And the underlying thing, of course, is all these needs to tie back to your business strategy and objectives. Now, of course, sharing all these skills that you learn is great, but let's not forget what I really want to emphasize today is that there's the human skills that's still just as important as your digital skills. Right? Your workforce continues to need how to manage change. I think the teamwork capabilities need to really improve, and I'm sure you're all having very trying times, since March this year. Communication now is very different. As I'm now speaking to a screen, instead I would have loved to, be in front of everybody right now. Adaptability. We need to be a bit more creative. But the one I really want to stress on is leadership. Right? All of you who have teams working for you, I think that leadership skills will just need to be taken up a couple of notches in this new world and how we work with our workforce. So putting these two together will give you those future skills to remain adaptable and relevant. Can I have the slide 11, please? So what we've found is post-COVID-19, or even, I don't think it's post yet, there are really 6 key questions that leading organizations should ask themselves in this new world. The first one, I think you probably all have asked already, how and where will work get done, right? How do you segment your workforce? You have people working from home. How do you now balance contingent workers and full-time employees, work locations and all that? So that's still a crucial question. I know a lot of you are still going through that. But the other ones to think about quite rapidly is, are we building the right skills, right, alongside digital skills for our people? Are our reskilling, upskilling programs effective? If we do have one, right? Should we rethink our approach to learning and development? Right? Are we fixing any shortfalls, especially in our need for more tech-savvy leadership? Right? And the last one is extremely crucial, of course. Are we applying those learnings, right, from this crisis? Right? That's an important one. And I hope, and I'm sure a lot of you are already applying question 6 to your daily work. Can I have slide 12, please? So to answer some of those questions, here are just 5 critical steps that you can take in your organization. The first one is maybe an obvious one. So how do you assess your current and future business needs and identify any skills gaps or mismatches, right, with your workforce today, capabilities, and even the culture, so that you build that case for change. Second is building a future-proof skill strategy. So obviously, what are then those plans to close those gaps, right? The third one is laying your culture foundation. This is where I was sharing earlier. Behaviors are just as important, right, in terms of the new world and not just about knowledge. And this is where I would actually urge you to inspire your employees to lead this and innovate in your working place. The fourth one is really the crux of where we are today. Develop and implement an upskilling program. I will even push so far as to even come up with a reskilling program and make sure that learning experience is still a good one. Right? And lastly, of course, we need to always evaluate that return on investment once we put all this in place. Can I have slide 14, please? Now, I know I said earlier that the global CEOs in financial services are not as confident, but what's really good is that I can share some examples that FS around the world, organizations have actually already put in place to help accelerate transformation. One is obviously having their digital fitness assessment on their workforce to at least show what gaps they have. Some have also deployed hackathons to support their innovation initiatives. Some have also launched communities of interest so that the right groups of work employees can collaborate and innovate. And lastly, a lot of organizations, of course, started to invest in digital learning platforms as well. And I'm sure some of you would have noticed in the last few months, everyone working from home, your e-learning, your checklist would have gone tick, 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 and I think that's great. But there's still a lot more work to be done. Can I slide 15, please? closer to home for me, I just want to share with you, even PwC is on this journey. We need to upskill our folks and make sure we improve our digital knowledge. All of you are here this morning. Please feel free. You can scan the QR code. You can download the PwC's digital fitness app for free and go check it out. And really, all it does, it has a huge range of knowledge that you can read, listen to. That's going to help us be more aware and understand these topics in the digital world. And I think what I want to also say that later on today, what I'm looking forward to is, hearing from Datuk Nora how Maybank is going to obviously be, for her to share how Maybank is continuing on their journey in terms of accelerating workforce transformation in this digital world. With that, let me just hand over to my colleague, Jasmin, to continue sharing some of her insights and thoughts on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwan-Sek. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all doing fine. So as Kwan-Sek left us with some very interesting thoughts, at the very beginning, he did say that the quote from Bill Gates that talks to us about how we need to continuously reinvent and reinvigorate. If I can have slide 16, please. When we look at workforce transformation, I just wanted us to just ponder on some thoughts post the lockdown now. What was going through the mind of our leaders? What was also going through the mind of our people, I think, is a question we all ask as we move forward. Definitely the leadership was anxious. The employees themselves, you and I, we were also anxious. Some parts of us were excited. We all went into digital mode very quickly, and I think that's something we should all be very proud of ourselves. But nonetheless, there were a lot of looming thoughts. How will we continue this? How will we ensure our people are productive? How will we ensure that if we are connected online, that we still have enough interaction and that we can still connect and our cultures can be rock solid? How does all that happen when it's digital? More recently, just a few days ago, our Prime Minister addressed us, telling us how the numbers with COVID are rising again, and that we need to be very mindful of the SOPs and that they might mandate the use of masks. We also know that Melbourne is already in lockdown. So what we are saying here is that we are truly living in unprecedented times. It is very challenging and it is very uncertain. So the question for us here as practitioners is how do we build, groom and grow our workforce from strength to strength, given this turbulence and uncertainty? Let's look at slide 18. I always say that trust is a serious commodity, and ever so now. We need to ensure that there is trust with the way we work. We trust our systems. We trust the integrity of the data that is being transmitted and the use of how our people are using this data and this information. How then do we actually enable our workforce with the right behaviors and the right tools to accelerate this? This is what we talk about, and we say that this is called the integrated employee experience. On slide 19, when we look at this, when we say let's reimagine the employee experience for the future, I will also say it's for the now and the future. Where are we going to start? As I shared with you earlier, many questions were asked. We are in unprecedented times. So where do we really start? I would say let's look at three critical areas as we want to journey on to accelerate digital workforce transformation for FS. Focus on the few business outcomes on your extreme left, as I said. What will be those few business outcomes as an organization and as a business that you really want to achieve? Oftentimes we come up with large strategies and large plans where our people only know what impacts them at their work level or what they're supposed to do within their functionality. This is where the opportunity is for us now to say, we really need to zoom down on the critical few that we want to focus on and align this with the work our people do and align that with how we then serve our customers, our clients, and our suppliers, so on and so forth. Determining this critical few business outcomes is very pivotal for us. As we define and position that, we look at the next area. How do we connect with our employees emotionally? A lot of times, I've been in financial services, whether with industry or as a consultant over 20 odd years. And oftentimes when you talk to organizations or leaders about emotional connection, there's a lot of discomfort with the word. When we talk about emotional connection, it is really about aligning the employees, aligning what we want as an organization with the value that they have as individuals per se, and the value that they bring with the work they do. We cannot continue to look at this in silo in terms of a function and a person just as a person churning the work, but the value of the person over and beyond the functionality. This is where the dynamics then increase. Once we do this, then we can go on to the next stage. We say, how do we design and develop the integrated employee experience? Now that we know what are the critical few factors we want to achieve as a business, we know what value our employees have, and we have communicated this, we've made this clear. Now we design and develop this. Then we find the right digital tools to accelerate this experience. Oftentimes what we do is we go out and we buy tools, or we buy a certain kind of talent and bring them in the hope that it will answer all our questions. We can do that, but that is really putting the cart before the horse. We need to first determine what we want to achieve as a business, find those alignments, and then digital is a brilliant accelerator. So here again, I'm saying be very mindful of the cost and investment. As I said earlier, I was with the banking sector 20 years ago. Then branches were very centric. The look and feel of a branch was very important. Location was so key, right? If you got a branch at this particular road or this particular place, it meant it was good for business. Today, we're looking at virtual banking, branchless, right? We don't need the branches anymore. So yes, that's 20 years ago. And as Kwan-Sek also shared some perspective of how things have evolved. But now the pandemic has thrown us into a quandrum of questions that we say, how now do we actually gear up, being very mindful of the investments we make today, because they can actually become obsolete as close as tomorrow, right? So being mindful of that is where we say, take cognizance of what we want as an organization, appreciating our DNA and what built us to where we are, and how will we enhance that based on the critical few things that we want to achieve as an outcome for our organization and the purpose of our business. On slide 20, and slide 20, let's look at this closer to us as financial services. Where do we need to start as we want to accelerate this journey? I say let's look at diversity beyond banking at the first column on the left, where we look at a talent pool beyond banking or beyond financial services, as we say. Okay. The examples here that I'd like to share with you is here. Oftentimes we know this, but when we go out to acquire talent or when we groom talent, it's always within the sphere of financial services. But we know we have to be more than just financial services. The way we approach our customers need to change. The way we train our employees need to change, as Kwan-Sek shared with us as well. And the way we approach training per se and learning has to change. And that's why we introduce what we as ourselves in PwC are using to upskill our people, called the DFA. And I urge you to download that. It's actually very interesting. It is a tool that you can learn on the go. It has a lot of general knowledge, but it opens up your perspective and mind as to how you need to start thinking. And that's the critical start. Now, again, when I talk about the talent pool, and as you can see on the slide, there's FMCG, startups, media, telco, and that's not limiting. A long time ago, when banks wanted to shift forward to being more customer-centric, and where the challenges were very, very straightforward in the sense that every bank or every financial service entity could churn out the same product, which is still very true today. Everybody can churn out the same product and the same service. What is your differentiator? Would the differentiator be in the talent that you have, in the way your product is positioned, in the way your services are managed, in the experience that you build with the customer? And the only way you can do this with the customer is if you actually inculcate these values and these behaviors in your people. The organization I was with a long time ago went out and decided to rock the boat and say, bring in the advertisers and bring in the folks from FMCG to drive sales and marketing. Did this create a problem? Yes, it did. Because these folks could create and build products in 24 hours. And that was an issue because within the banking sector, we were not able to actually build products within a day because we had regulation, there were risk checks, there were controls. But what we understood is we needed to move in this area. So of course, there was a facilitation to move this along. Once you have that appreciation that you should inculcate and infuse different kinds of talent to create greater diversity, is when then you can be bold and drive innovation. Again, these are not fatherhood or motherhood statements. They are essential. In order to drive a bold and innovative organization, you need to be able to create the platform that people feel confident, that they trust that the system and the organization values their feedback, transparency of what they can say, the innovation of their thinking, the different aspects of how they're looking at things are so critical. Are you ready to actually harness those thinkings and recognize them for it, and maybe even reward them for it? What we have here, as you can see, is where we talk about multidisciplinary talent development. One is to create the platform where there is openness and trust, where people can actually share, grow, and innovate. But very importantly also is that you give them the impetus to move. Rotations between departments is something you can do quite easily. Transformation project involvement, and even very junior folks to be involved, because they are ultimately the people working at on the ground on the matters that the organization is pushing up. Capitalize on the partnerships that you have, the ecosystem that you are interacting with, and send your people for secondments. And coaching from senior experts is something we believe is so important to be done. You don't always have to go out to bring in external people to train, mentor, coach, and grow your people. There's a volume of talent within your own organizations. If you look for it and if you define your business purposes, and using and leveraging that capability and capacity, you groom and grow your people. These are key factors before you decide on digital acceleration. This builds the capability, this builds the trust, and this strengthens your culture. This is how we say you drive boldness and innovation. And then the next layer on your extreme right is where we say you become more agile and dynamic. There's a shift in the current ways of working. Optimizing trust, we've just spoke about that. And this needs to be embedded. When you say you want to push trust and innovation, you want to push critical few behaviors, this needs to be embedded in performance management. You need to find a common thread that binds all layers of your organization with commonalities. For example, whether you're in technology, whether you're in credit, whether you're in operations, whether you're in marketing and sales, while your functions are very different, there are common factors that bind you as an organization. This is where the performance matrix or the KPI should be centric, and it should be universal. This way, you get traction with the objectives of being bold and innovative, with the objectives of building greater traction and innovation, right? And finally, as I must say, cross-functional collaboration is very important. Again, a lot of times in very niche organizations and in financial services where it's very centric, be very professional within the work that you do, we tend to be very focused in our own functions without greater appreciation or even connection with the other functions. But that's important. So you need to be able to create the platforms where that cross-functional collaboration is there. Why? Because that builds empathy, that builds appreciation of other functions. It teaches us to think beyond our work scope. It teaches us to connect what we do with what others do. It then builds an environment of innovation, which then strengthens your culture and gives you the impetus to move forward. It propels you forward. So these are the building blocks that we need to put in place, as I say again, before we push and say digital accelerator. So accelerating a transformation for digital needs to start with this, the thinking and the building blocks in place. Digital will then be a very nice overlay to push things forward. If I have the slide 21, please. So I hope I can leave you with these thoughts, and I'll very happily take questions after this. But it's not the strongest of the species that survive, as Charles Darwin has said, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the time is very ripe for us to say that we need to expand the way we look at things and the way we want to engage with our people, understanding that the investments that we have in creating the right experiences with our people will give us the traction in the business that we want. Overlay and underlay and encompassing all of this is the leadership. We cannot underestimate the quality, the involvement of leadership in this area. Leadership needs to be transparent and communicate these efforts. That's one. The next thing for adaptable change is to make sure we find the alignment, as I said earlier, and we drill into what that alignment is. So we create a common ground that binds us as an organization. We cannot be bold and innovative if there isn't a bind between the various different functionalities that we have as an organization. With that, then you can decide what tools, what are going to be the priorities or behaviors that you're going to reward and recognize, and you will be successful. We're very excited now to hear from Datuk Nora on what Maybank's plans and strategies are in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Prasad, and thank you, Jasmin. I could not have asked for a better intro and setting the stage and context setting, so fabulous. Now, maybe, something Kwan-Sek said earlier just prompted me to change my start, if you like. After all, when we talk about digital workforce and digital behavior, it's about agility and being in the now. So Kwan-Sek mentioned that he would rather be in front of you physically in a program. I love being out there with a live audience, but equally love talking to you using technology, using Zoom. For a person like me who I juggles things like all the time, this is wonderful. I could engage with so many different people across the world, right from my office at home, and this little corner, right, that I call my office. So it's beautiful. Now, what that emphasizes is one of the key points that I wanted to talk about and underscore. I mean, nothing new, but I just wanted to underscore that diversity and inclusivity is absolutely key in how we accelerate the digital workforce that works for our organizations. So, yep, and that really triggered my thought earlier. So, another point that I want to underscore that both Kwan-Sek and Jasmin had mentioned, which now I'm starting to take you through the thinking behind what we did and are doing and are pursuing in Maybank. We're still learning, by the way, and we keep learning. We adjust, we recalibrate live. But what really struck in our minds was what Forbes and IBM had released. I think it was some years back. In their study, they said that 80% of companies that start a digital transformation process fail, simply because they forget that all this is still human business, right? So their findings, not mine, so their findings is these companies that fail just focus too much on digital optimization and digital marketing and all things digital, when they should actually be discussing those, focusing on the center of what handles them all, right? That handles everything, and it's humans. So this is a fabulous topic for this morning, and I think it's a very good time out to reflect. Now, so the Maybank journey was underscored and was carried out within these foundations and thinking process. Number one, it's not about tech. All right, it's what you do with the technology, right? And technology causes behaviors. Again, the famous Zoom, right? I think we're all now experts with Zoom, and some of you use Microsoft Teams, some of you use Google Hangout, whatever, right? But these are part of our life now. It causes us to behave differently, achieve differently, and be impactful differently. So that's one of the key messages, really. It's not about the technology, it's what you do with it. Second, it's not about skills alone. So absolutely right, Kwan-Sek, right? You upskill, you reskill, but really, I like to use the analogy of the problem that the country had for many, many years. And it was at one point before IR 4.0 took on the theme, and then now, of course, COVID-19 and the new normal. So prior to that, the issue that we were grappling with as a nation was the unemployability of graduates. Now, the principle behind that is a formula that, especially HR practitioners, that we're supposed to be experts on, right? Competence, ability, capability, right, is a formula. It's skill plus experience and knowledge plus mindsets. So that's the answer. And it's such a simple thing, but so hard and so complex to execute. So again, second point, it's not about the skills alone. It's an entire suite of things that you have to deal with. Third, do not do this in a vacuum. So if you look at the slide I put there, you just have to be current. You just have to know what's happening around you. The ecosystem is actually made up of the three things that I've put there, right? You've got to look at the workforce futurization aspects, but you can't choose to just do that on its own. The workforce operates within an environment. So the workplace has to be futurized, has to be recalibrated at the same time. And thirdly, the infrastructure, right? And what do I mean by the infrastructure? It's the platform, it's the whole suite of policies and processes and tools. You can't ask someone, for example, and teach them agility and tell them to be agile when the policies restrain them and hold them back. So it's not a choice. You just have to deal with the entire ecosystem. And fourthly, I think Jasmin mentioned this as well. The biggest part of changing and accelerating into a truly digital workforce that's effective is curating the way we think. And that's really, really tough, isn't it? Okay, so if you go to the next slide, the next one, sorry. If you have questions about the rest of the slides, do so later, but I think it's my slide number 5 after this. Next slide, please. Next one. The one that shows the Maybank journey. Next one, please. Yes, this is it. Okay, so this gives you an idea of how we put in place all that I mentioned earlier. Okay, so you see, we started way back in 2017, knowing that it's really not just about the tech, it's not just about the plan to reskill and upskill, which we did, by the way, right? So 2018, after a year in 2017 of dealing with some of those that I will give a little bit more color later, but the list that you see there, those were to prepare mindsets, was to open up minds and break the norms then in a way, right? We didn't have the COVID-19 then. I'm so thankful for some of the silver linings that we're getting from the lockdown, because that has helped us accelerate, and I'll come to that shortly. But in 2017, in most of the programs and the effort that we put out to our people in the workplace was really around the parts of the ecosystem that I mentioned just now. How do we put people out into a new way of working? Now that we've got the MCO, I can use that as an example. We laugh about and talk about the world's greatest experiment when we were all shut in our homes. But if you debrief that is fabulous, because that's really what it takes. Pushing someone into a very different way of operating, and the resiliency of humankind is proven again, right? In terms of how we've responded to such. So those were some of the thinking behind some of what we rolled out. For example, the Go Ahead Take Charge program, the Go Ahead Transform program. That not only helped us open up minds, but also started to emphasize on the building of not teams. Now, I noted that Kwan-Sek mentioned something about teamship and teamwork that's required in the new norm. I would expand on that because we've gone beyond that. We're looking more in terms of what really is required in a truly digital, effective digital environment. It's actually a networked environment. So when we did the Go Ahead Transform, for example, and all other programs that we did, it is about enabling the individuals to create their own networks. And the larger the network, the better. Think social media, right? Think your Facebook network, think LinkedIn network. But that's what a digital workforce require. And that's part of what we have to create. But of course, we did the reskilling and upskilling, as I mentioned, if you refer to the next slide later, you'll see we've adapted from the Institute of Banking and Finance Singapore, because they just sent out their skill competency profile much earlier than the rest of us. And you and I know that why start from scratch, right? When you can just build on something with due recognition given, of course. So yes, we took our people through the 6 pillars, if you like, and we are still going through them in terms of the reskilling portion. We ran programs not only for the staff, but the board and exco, right? Went to class. We took Python. It was to demystify and make people comfortable and have a minimum level of consistent digital literacy. Now, what we also did in early 2018 was to set a baseline, right? So we actually conducted a MI FutureReady survey, which is on the slide, and we had 90% over completion rate, and some fabulous learnings from that we built our other programs henceforth on. One of the things that we discovered then was exactly what Kwan-Sek mentioned on his survey of the 10,000 bankers, I believe. Everybody was ready. They were ready, and they are just waiting for go, right? So what do I do, right? And how do I do it? But the other thing that we discovered was the earliest people who completed the survey were actually not the digital natives. They are the digital immigrants, if you like, right? Although I don't like calling myself a digital immigrant. So I'm a digital native by now. But you know what's defined as a digital immigrant. We didn't start with the internet. But these were the people who completed it first, and they were the ones who had the highest score. That's another discovery we had. So absolutely. Right, those were very important learnings that we used as we built the rest of the programs. Now, we then continued at the same time, right? Because we were dealing with, again, skilling, creating the right policies, and you know that we did we launched our sabbatical, 2-year sabbatical. You go ahead and do what you want to do to get yourself up to speed with living in a digital world. And pursue what you want to pursue. We tackled the agility portion. We had our own internal crowdtivation platform, which was to cater for resource management within the organization. It's actually our version of a gig workforce within the organization. So Maybankers, today we have about 3,600, 3,800 Maybankers who are actively using the crowdtivation platform. What that means is there are managers who post their requirements, short-term, project. I have an event, even I have an event, I need an MC, and the users and the resources in the organization just responses to the need, and they get matched up and they perform gigs, right? So those are really putting all the theories into action. And that's how, as per the work from home, the world's largest experiment, okay, that's when you get the right behaviors moving. Now, today, right, we have achieved a little bit of a maturity in terms of how we measure what's successful, right? So I'm going to just briefly touch on that as in post-COVID. One of the things that I spoke on with my EXCO colleagues very recently, is the measure on learning, right? A traditional, just an example of a traditional one that probably all of you are still using. I'm using it too, because that's what others are using, and we need a consistent ruler. But we can't stay where we are, right? So that example is learning mandates, right? I'm happy to tell you that in March, and remember that 2 weeks of the 4 weeks in March, we were all locked up in our homes. In March, in Maybank, we achieved the highest ever learning numbers, as in learning individuals. 17,000 of our staff was actively in learning programs in the month of March. Now, how did we achieve that? It was all virtual. And that is brilliant, because like I said, we've never been able to do that, right? And so learning mandates has to be replaced, because in my dashboard, in this month's Expo meeting, it popped up as red because it was under the global benchmark for learning mandates that you should achieve. However, right, what we've got are learning bites, virtual, by hours, right? And I said the 17,000, we'll continue with that too. We call it the hashtag Learning Never Stops campaign. It was a campaign during the MCO to keep people focused, but we continue because it is working so well. So we are going to replace the learning mandates with different measures in terms of the ability of our people to get just in time knowledge and democratization of learning. That's what it is, right? So they are equipped with their smartphones, platforms to give them the knowledge that they need, webinars like this on the go, and those will be the measures of whether there is learning, there is a learning culture in the organization. So I do not have the time in 15 minutes to cover everything there, but as Prasad said, you're going to have this slide. You can go through it, and I'm happy to take your questions later, or even later in via WhatsApp. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Nora. Thank you, Kwan-Sek. Thank you, Jasmin, for your insights and perspectives. We have about 250 attendees today, and I'm sure you've given them useful information, for them to make their decisions. Now, just as an aside to attendees, I just want to, you'll see a QR code there on the screen now. We would be grateful if you could use your phones to scan the code and complete the survey to get your CPD points while we now move on to the questions. Let me start with Kwan-Sek, actually. Kwan-Sek, you mentioned earlier on about this, the CEO survey, and that financial services were, lagging in terms of the reskilling and all that. Why is that? Does regulation play a part in this? I mean, we are a particularly regulated industry.
I think there are many different, unfortunate answers to that question. I'd like to maybe say the expectations of the financial services CEOs are quite high. So, yeah, I think the question for that survey was if they felt that they've made significant efforts in upskilling programs. So, I think if you look at that, then I'm sure a lot of banks have done globally. It's just that they felt they just needed that much more to do, and that's the gap. Yeah, so they were just, their answer was they felt less likely that they made significant efforts in that space. But as I shared the example, they have made efforts, obviously.
Right, right. Dr. Nora, I just wanted to, there have been a lot of questions about work from home. I think that's the biggest change for all of us, basically. And it goes something like this. Do you see more of it being embraced post-pandemic? You know, how do you ensure staff effectiveness and, in fact, well-being from a distance? And also, actually, how have you found board of directors, stakeholder mindsets when it comes to this entire work from home stuff? I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, yes, yes. Like I said, I am a believer of work from anywhere, right? Just so for people who don't know this, way back in 2004 when I was working in London, you know, we were already on work from home. So I was very happy, okay, when everybody had to work from home so they could understand what it really entails. Is it here to stay? I believe it is, right? Every survey released by you know, any reputable firm that's out there shows that at least 50% of the respondents are seriously going to keep a model of work from home permanent in their organization. Likewise, for Maybank, we have every intention to do so for a variety of reasons. One, very glaringly, is business continuity. It's a BCM requirement, right? So we are looking at about 15 to 20% of our workforce who will be mobile. So we use the term mobile. Because there's a you know, another workshop to talk about, is it work from home or is it work from anywhere, you know, and Prasad, as you highlighted, we are a bank, so you know, data secrecy and data, you know, security. Do you have is your office at home in a safe place, and so forth. So we are learning, but we are determined, especially from a BCM perspective, that we cannot go back to the workforce of the past, if you like. What does it take to make it happen? Like I mentioned, you know, understanding how to measure productivity, for example, right? And it has, I mean, again, Maybank, like PwC and a few other like-minded, progressive people, okay, we actually have been dissecting the performance management system for many years now. I know that because I've been discussing with Salika from PwC. You know, so we many years ago, through the 5 scale stuff, and go we met, not met, because the intention is the behavior, is the discussion, not arguing over 3 decimal points, you know, at year end and so forth. So we are happy because it's about reimagining performance management. Now, I'm happy to say that people are productive. It's not difficult. I mean, we had our CEO in Philippines who, you know, during the lockdown said to his team, now everybody sign on 5 each, and we did, and I'm happy to say that he actually achieved 90 million revenues just during that lockdown with that clear instruction of what needs to be done. We've been hiding behind the old system, Prasad, and not going anywhere, isn't it? So you mentioned well-being. So we will continue, because it's about mental well-being, emotional, as well as productivity, fitness, right? But one more point, what I emphasized earlier, it's not for everybody. So I said diversity and inclusivity. You like Zoom, I don't like Zoom. I like Zoom, you don't like Zoom, right? I can work at home because I'll be productive. You can't, then you better have a policy to cater for that. That is what I meant by the infrastructure just now. Your policy needs to be able to cater to the diversity that's required. So population-wise, when I say reconfigure the workforce, a digital workforce is made up of different components. So we will have those with the 9 to 5s, we will have mobile, and we will have co-location, right? Because it's you know, there will be pandemics again in future. That's the common belief.
But I mean, I actually wanted to just finish with that thought about, are you finding, or even to Kwan-Sek and Jasmin, are you guys finding via surveys that there is board of directors, stakeholder, skepticism towards work from home and stuff like that, basically? I mean, they're of a different generation half the time. So, I can see why they would be. I mean, it becomes out of that thing about trust. I just wanted your thoughts on that, basically.
I'll just say absolutely yes. Of course. The answer is of course. Yeah. It's not hunky-dory. You just have to, strategize how to move this forward. That's my short answer. Jasmin, Kwan-Sek.
Right, so it's there, yeah.
Yeah, Prasad, I'd like to add, yes, a lot of our clients have been reaching out to us, even during MCO, asking how do we ensure productivity. They are worried, like, is their staff working at home and all that. So yes, the short answer is yes. I just want to emphasize what Datuk Nora says is so true. Hence, very quickly, the leaders have to work at SOPs, policies, procedures, but also the infrastructure in place. I know a lot of IT heads are seriously hard at work right now to get that going. Yeah.
I wanted to turn to Jasmin. There are obviously going to be people who can't do digital as well as a lot of others. It's just the nature of the human race, really. How can we support adaptability? How can we support the resilience and agility? And isn't it sometimes a self-responsibility? And, not to be controversial, isn't it the job of government as well? To a certain extent.
Agreed. It is personal responsibility, the government's responsibility as well to a certain point, yes. But what I think is very important, Prasad, is that we actually support our people. And I'll be very candid here. I'm also very technologically challenged, personally, right? Quite old-fashioned. I just started doing online banking myself. But what I think is important is that we need to recognize where our people need assistance and where our people actually can thrive. So again, very dear to me, of course, with PwC, what we've done is we've tried to keep things very simple, right? We migrated from Lotus Notes to where we are today with Google, right? So we have Google, and that was a massive shift for us in terms of how we could actually function. And that didn't come about because we chose to actually go out and buy something to support our people, but we said we understood the nuances and the needs of our business and how to actually help our people manage with simpler ways of working so that they could be effective in the service and solutions that we offer our client. And we felt that this was one of the best platforms for us to use. And this is highly interactive, and someone who is as challenged as me, and I can speak to people who know me and they will tell you, we can actually have interactive slides where we work on the slides interactively, where communication is really at a touch of a button, and it takes the burden out of us. And I think that is where it is. Yes, it is personal responsibility, but I think as any responsible organization and leadership too, just as I said earlier, we need to understand what we want as a business. And once we define that, what will actually propel the digital interventions and inclusion that our people can work seamlessly and easily. So I think that is important. And you will find that once you set it and it's a lot more simplified, people who are also not so savvy tend to follow those who are more savvy. But simplification is the word here, as I would say, because yes, different people learn with different challenges. That's something we have done. Yeah.
So do you think we're perhaps focusing on the wrong things when we think about digitalization? We're starting to look for, many people assume that you're looking for a coder, someone who knows Python and SAS and all this. And at the end of the day, you look at the simplest thing, as an example is, you don't have to be a mechanic or a mechanical engineer to drive a car, but there are bad drivers and good drivers. You mentioned this, what do you call it, simplification. Is that, I mean, should we be thinking about how people think rather than particular technologies?
Totally agree. That couldn't resonate with me more, Prasad. As I said earlier, we often, when we hear the word digital, we run out and we purchase a tool or we purchase a program and we think that is the one right answer. And we keep piling up investment and cost factors when we keep looking for things like this. Whereas the answer is actually very simple. What do we really need? Do we need all these Python folks and Java folks? Do we need all these tools? So I think that's the pivotal question every organization needs to ask. But of course, there is the the push and the drive to say, we have started and we have done A, B, and C, right? But I think what we need to do is, before we do that, and that's what I was saying, be mindful of the investments you make today, because the landscape can change very quickly as soon as tomorrow. So agreed, don't go out and purchase, don't go out on a hunt. Let's focus on what we want and then determine what those factors are going to be. Simplification is actually not so simple, because we really need a lot of thinking. Yeah.
So, Kwan-Sek, going back to your thing, it's like the difference between those who chose Betamax over VHS. I hope people understand what I mean by that.
Oops, I understood that.
Well, I just wanted to actually also touch upon, how do we retrain the older generation, so on and so forth, to prepare them for all of this? I know it's a mindset change, but how do you prepare them? How do you, change their mindset? Datuk Nora, for instance, what do you think, especially for middle management, which is always the uncooked layer?
Well, Prasad, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we were pleasantly surprised, with, was when we administered the MI FutureReady quiz, which was compulsory, by the way, right? I mentioned that over 90% of our people responded and took the quiz. I said it's the digital immigrants, right? It's the people that you're saying, may not be ready. I think we've done enough to spook people, right? So they are very interested, they're very anxious, they want to know what to do. And that's where the challenge is, as we've underscored, all of us, right? It's not about sending people to go take Python and SQL and Hadoop, and right. But yes, we need to understand who are the ones who can do, who's more maths inclined, right? Then get them to go understand analytical tools, right? But then who are those? Because remember, if we can have 200 coders sitting there and they're not going to be immediately translating to revenues, right? So we need people who are CX people, right? Understand the end user. So to combine those two together, because business acumen, communications in the digital world, data intuition, these are less talked about when we talk about digital skills. You need to combine those. And that's what I mentioned just now about, why is someone unemployable when the person already have the skills, right? So, and why are, the results not coming from people you've reskilled? Because the environment's not conducive, or, you're not clear what you want to, them to do, right? Or you don't have the appetite, or you think you're regulated, right? And you can't do a lot of things. Yeah.
Well, I think Gen X and all that are quite much maligned, because Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, they're all Gen Xers. It's not like as if they're not particularly savvy. But let me come to my last question. For all three of you, you guys, can you elaborate on any constraints in workforce transformation in this sense? How can we manage it effectively? Is there anything Malaysia specific that you'd like to bring up, versus some success stories you might have seen? To anyone, actually, to the last question. Because, I think that Malaysia does embrace a lot of technology. I think per capita we use Facebook more than many other nations, for instance, so on and so forth. So is there really an issue, or are we worried about nothing is the thing? Or if we are worried about something, is there a particular constraint here, is my question, basically.
Why don't I kick off? I think the greatest challenge, if you ask me what's the greatest challenge, is the different mindsets. People who have a preference and are secretly wishing for the new normals to go away, whatever new normals, is defined as, right? So hoping that we'll go back very soon to how we were. And there should be enough of us who are determined to, yes, enjoy some of the stuff that we are used to in the past, but determined to not let the crisis go to waste. And I always say that, please don't let the crisis go to waste, the learnings, right? So that to me is the greatest challenge. But if we're looking for a solution, you're right, as a country, many of us are very tech savvy, right? Digital banking, I mean, look at Maybank, over 22 million of our customers use M2U. So, they do banking, Jasmin, they do banking via their smartphones. But what we lack, and we're not that big, we're big, but we're not that big. So I've always thought the solution is if all the parties come together, the government, private sector, individuals who could support, right? Wiring the entire country is important,
right?
Because connectivity, right? Yeah. That will equal the playing field for everybody. Whether it's the university students, because that was the issue as well, right? When they couldn't attend classes, right? Because they don't have accessibility, they have to look for a place in their little village, where there is Wi-Fi. So connectivity, I think, is very key.
So Wi-Fi as a utility should be the first priority.
Yes.
Yeah. Kwan-Sek, any final thoughts?
Thanks, Datuk Nora. I think my points will just overlay what she said. I think the biggest challenge still today in workforce alignment, it's about alignment in the leadership. I think organizations, like what Datuk Nora said, mindset, having leadership alignment and what to do is crucial. I'm sure you realize a lot of organizations have cash crunch now, but how much can you then put and invest in the infrastructure that we talked about? Because there are some questions on data security and stuff. It's the new normal. I think to answer that question, is this going to stay? It definitely will stay. In whatever form, we do not know yet, because we're still going through the pandemic in many ways. So putting in place money to invest in the infrastructure, in the education. This is something I'm passionate about. How do we prep our young adults who's in the uni today and about to come into the workforce? Are we giving them the right training, mindset, and skill sets, right, to be ready in the new world, or at least give them a good chance, So like what Datuk Nora was alluding to, how's the government working with everybody, the business, in prepping that next generation of the workforce? Because we here today are in the workforce already, and leaders are already doing something. But I'm just worried about the new group. Right. And speaking as a parent as well.
Fair enough. Jasmin, any final thoughts from yourself?
Yes, Prasad. Very quickly, being very mindful of time. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is the comfort zone that we're in, right? There's a way we've been working, we are comfortable with certain ways that we work, the way we think and we operate, and we know we have to shift, but it is making that shift and taking cognizance of that fact and looking at the effort, which can seem very mammoth and very voluminous to us, which is what I think is holding a lot of us back. So what we do is we operate and we go back to autopilot and we say, let's keep the lights on, let's keep running the business. I think while we do that, and while with this pandemic, it is essential that we do work on keeping the lights on and making sure we are up and running. But I think we need to also understand that it is a comfort zone that we won't be very comfortable in if we don't shift. So I think those are one of the challenges, I think, that is predominantly is the inertia to this movement. That's what I have to say.
Thanks, guys. Okay, so I've got to wrap it up here. On behalf of everyone, I'd like to thank our speakers today, Datuk Nora, Jasmin, Kwan-Sek, once again for your time, for sharing your valuable experiences with our members. Thank you as well to all our attendees who've engaged with us, and we hope you've enjoyed the discussions today. We do apologize that we were unable to accommodate everyone who had questions of the speakers due to the time constraints. Before we go, I'd like to encourage you to continue honing your knowledge, as most of us carry on working from home, as there are many, many online programs and courses available. So please feel free to reach out to AICB if you need assistance in your professional development. I'd like to let you know that our new Sustainable Finance series with the World Bank and IFFIM will begin in August. So be sure to tune in as our panel of speakers discuss the latest developments in those areas. Before you go, do participate in the webinar survey, which you may access via the QR code. Give us feedback and complete the survey and obtain your CPD points. Once again, everyone, thank you. Stay safe and do visit our website for updates on our upcoming webinar sessions. All the best. Thank you again very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.